Welcome to Shad's Guitar Show. Whether it's the gear or the players who made the gear famous, this podcast is about all things guitar. Well, hey everyone, welcome into another episode of Shad's Guitar Show. Glad you're joining me for this episode. We're cooking right along in 2026. So far, things are going great for me, and I hope the same is true for you. I wanted to do something a little different today and talk about, a lot of times we talk about the bigger aspects like guitar models or brands or amps or, the bigger picture items. There are some small components in your guitar that actually have a pretty cool legacy, as well as the guitars that you find them in. So today we're going to touch on CTS potentiometers. And CTS pots, as we all know, are found in many high-end guitars. So I thought it might be cool to just kind of do a dive into the story behind CTS. So when we as guitar players talk about tone, we obsess over pickups, amplifiers, effects, a lot of different things that affect our tone. But there's one component that quietly shapes nearly every electric guitar ever made and almost never gets mentioned. Today we're talking about CTS potentiometers, the little metal cylinders that control your volume and tone, the unsung heroes of electric guitar history. From early radio sets to vintage Fenders and Gibsons to modern boutique builds, CTS pots have been turning signals and shaping music for nearly a century. CTS Corporation was founded in 1929 in Elkhart, Indiana, right at the dawn of the Great Depression. Originally known as Chicago Telephone Supply, CTS began life manufacturing telephone components, resistors, and variable controls. This was the golden age of radio, and potentiometers were a critical part of tuning, volume control, and signal shaping in consumer electronics. Even before electric guitars existed, CTS was earning a reputation for tight manufacturing tolerances, mechanical durability, and consistent electrical performance. And that reputation would later make them indispensable to the music instrument world. By the 1940s and early 50s, electric guitars were evolving fast. Amplified instruments required reliable, noise-free control components, and CTS was perfectly positioned. When companies like Fender and Gibson began scaling up production in the early 50s, they needed potentiometers that would not drift wildly in value, components that could survive heat, vibration, and stage use, massive quantities with reliable consistency, and CTS became one of the primary suppliers. And if you've ever opened a 1950s or 60s Fender or Gibson, chances are you've seen the familiar CTS stamp on the back of the pot. One of the reasons CTS pots are legendary among guitar techs and collectors is their date codes. Classic CTS pots are stamped with a number like 137-6534. The 137 indicates CTS manufacturer code. 65 would indicate the year, and 34 was the week of manufacture. This system has made CTS pots one of the most reliable ways to date vintage guitars, and sometimes even more accurate than serial numbers. It's also why original CTS pots add real value to vintage instruments. They are not just components, they're historical documents. So why do CTS pots sound the way they do? Well, here's where myth meets reality. Vintage CTS pots, especially from the 50s through the 70s, often measured well above their rated value. For instance, a 250K potentiometer might measure at 280 or even higher, and a 500K pot might read 550K or higher. Why does this matter? Well, higher resistance means less high frequency lost, more open, brighter tone, and greater dynamic response. So when players say old guitars breathe more or feel more alive, CTS pots are quietly part of that equation. They weren't intentionally designed to do this. It was simply manufacturing reality at the time. But guitarists fell in love with the result. By the late 70s and into the 80s, the electronic industry changed dramatically. Mass production, tightened tolerances, cost cutting became standard procedure. overseas manufacturing expanded. Well, CTS adapted, but some guitarists felt the newer pots didn't quite match the magic of the earlier decades. Still, CTS never disappeared. While other suppliers came and went, CTS remained a trusted OEM supplier for major manufacturers and a favorite amongst repair technicians who valued reliability. In the 1990s and into the 2000s, vintage correct guitar building exploded. Boutique builders, custom shops, and restoration specialists wanted components that behaved like the originals, and CTS responded. They began offering vintage taper audio pots, custom resistance ranges, matched sets, higher torque options, solid brass shafts, and improved carbon tracks. This era cemented CTS as not just a legacy brand, but a modern standard. And today, CTS pots are found in Fender Custom Shop instruments, Gibson historic reissues, boutique guitars and amplifiers, and high-end pedal builders. Nearly a century after its founding, CTS is still producing potentiometers in massive quantities, but with far more consistency and customization than ever before. And modern CTS pots offer smooth, predictable tapers, lower noise floors, tighter tolerances, and versions specifically voiced for guitar and bass. And importantly, they're still built with the expectation that musicians will trust them for decades of use. CTS potentiometers are the perfect example of how the smallest component can have the biggest impact. They don't make sound on their own, but they do decide how much of your guitar's voice will make it to your amplifier. From early radio circuits to the birth of rock and roll to the boutique guitar boom of today, CTS pots have been there, quietly turning, shaping, and preserving tone. So the next time you roll your volume knob back just a hair and hear your guitar clean up perfectly, you might want to thank CTS. If you enjoyed this episode, please make sure and share it with your fellow gear nerds. Leave me a rating and follow me on socials, Shad's Guitar Show on Instagram, and subscribe at Shad's Guitar Show on YouTube. I sincerely appreciate your support, and always remember, the best guitarist is the one having the most fun.